Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Welcome to Talk Gertie to Me, the Charm Patterns podcast, where we chat vintage glamour, sewing, creative rabbit holes, and fashion history, all through a campy, queer, and feminist pop culture lens. So throw on your favorite silk robe, grab a mocktail, and let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Gretchen Hirsch, also known as Gertie. I'm really excited to be back for another episode in our new podcast series. And today I'm doing something a little bit different. It's just me today, no Andrea. And we're going to try a solo podcast. So I guess what I'm going to be doing is monologuing to you. And I'm excited. So you should know that I'm at home and I'm podcasting how I believe podcasting is meant to happen in my imagination, which is from my couch with my pets surrounding me. So Millie is next to me, and I just heard Alfie come thunder paws into the living room. So you may hear some background noises. I'm also doing this in a silk robe, which it just felt correct. So yeah, I'm really comfy. I have my microphone next to me on the couch, and we're just going to try you're just hanging out. It's just fireside chat here. So I just returned from Palm Springs, and as you may know, I wrote about this in the magazine. Palm Springs is just one of my favorite places to vacation and also just to go for inspiration. It really is a mid-century modern mecca, fashion, design, architecture, and it's like a time capsule in a lot of ways. And it was a town where a lot of Hollywood stars would go on vacation. There was a rule in Hollywood at the time when all these actors were under contract in sort of the golden age that actors couldn't go more than 2 hours away from Hollywood. So Palm Springs was right in that limit, and it became this sort of fabulous vacation town for the stars of Hollywood. So it's a really amazing place to go for inspiration, but also relaxation. Oh my God, it was like 90 degrees all last week, and I was just hanging out by the pool. Speaking of silk robes, I do have a life hack for you all. If you're interested in cultivating a sort of like mysterious, eccentric, woman of a certain age vibe, which I know I am, you should bring a silk robe, like a full length silk robe with you on vacation and then wear that as a cover up. Okay? It's life changing. I felt really fabulous. It covers pretty much all your skin if you're worried about sun exposure, which I always am. And you just feel it's so much more glamorous than wearing a pool cover up or, God forbid, a towel. I could not stop talking about how much I loved my robe all week. I brought this really beautiful one from a little indie brand in Vancouver called Christine Lingerie. And then I wore it in my room. And it made me excited to maybe incorporate that into a future pattern. I feel like we all just need something really glamorous to lounge poolside and at home in. I also did a little bit of vintage shopping. There's one store in Palm Springs that I have to go to every time now since I discovered it on my last trip. It's a little store called Iconic Atomic, and it has a really amazing collection of Hawaiian, tropical, and also just everyday and also formal wear from the mid-century. And they have a great collection of wedding dresses. So if you're looking for a vintage wedding dress, try there for sure. But you may have seen in my Instagram stories, I tried on, and I did bring home, okay, one wrap dress that I don't think anyone sees my vision for because no one was excited about this. But it's a striped wrap dress, and it wraps around your body in a really unusual way so that when it's finished wrapping, it looks like you just have two ties on either side of your waist, where your front princess seams would be. And it's really cute. It's green stripes. It has a pink frog applique on it, which apparently is not for everyone, but it is for me. So I'm really excited about that. I'd never seen a wrap dress like that before, so that definitely needed to be a research piece. And then I found this in amazing condition 4-piece family set, a Hawaiian tropical set. So for the mom, there's a below knee length. It's like our Charm Patterns waterfall dress in execution, right? So it has a tie inside where you cinch it. It looks like a big muumuu, and then you cinch it, and it's really fabulous. Has a couple different features that I really liked. It has pleating underneath the bust that gives a really beautiful shaping to the bust when you cinch it. And then also, instead of just a gathered back, it has a back low scoop neck with pleats. Really beautiful. It fit me really well. And then it has a men's Hawaiian shirt, a little boy's Hawaiian shirt, and then a little girl's dress, all in the same fabric. And the little girl's dress is so cute. It's like one of those little toddler shift dresses with the buttons on the straps. And it gave me such, I don't know, I just think someday we just need to expand. Obviously, I'm really inspired by tropical garments of the 50s. And I just think we need to expand into maybe other members of the family. Obviously, there would need to be a toy poodle sized garment as well for me. I also found this really beautiful 40s dress with a super unusual neckline. I left it there because I was like, it's just too weird. It has this sort of like scallop neckline. It's in black taffeta. And then there's like a second neckline underneath that is pink taffeta with black lace over it. And the black scallops are off the shoulder. And then the lace neckline has just traditional shoulder straps. And then it also has these lace shoulder pieces. And it's really odd. It also has a pink flower corsage pin. It's odd, but the more I looked at the pictures I took of it, the more I couldn't stop thinking of it. And I had to call them and tell them to put it on hold for me. So that came home with me as well. So that's just a little update on Palm Springs and my vacation. And that's not even what we're here to talk about today. I don't know if you guys like it when podcasters give life updates, but I kind of like a little bit. But then I like them to get into the topic at hand, which is what we're going to do right now. And the topic at hand is talking about the dress that Audrey Hepburn wore to the 1954 Oscars ceremony, where she won for Roman Holiday for Best Actress. I did a recreation of this dress for the cover of our quarterly digital magazine for Patreon called Vintage by Gertie. I've always loved this dress, and I wanted to figure out how to recreate it using charm patterns. So today is really for us to talk a little bit about fashion history and then hopefully a lot about sewing and different techniques in a sort of more general way. So we're going to talk about types of lace. We're going to talk about how to choose what type of lace for your project. I want to talk about lace at different price points and what makes a lace worth $160 a yard versus $10 a yard versus $30 a yard. And I also want to talk a little bit about spaghetti straps and the making of them. So first of all, let's talk about what is this dress. So this is the dress, like I said, that Audrey Hepburn wore to the 1954 Academy Awards ceremony. She won that night for Best Actress for Roman Holiday. And she wore this ivory lace dress. It is sort of a midi length or T length. And it looks like a taffeta underlining to me or underlay. The bodice has a high neckline, so very high, covers the collarbone, sort of bateau neck or boat neck, which is a really iconic neckline, I think, for Audrey Hepburn. So this high neckline, very common for Audrey Hepburn. It also had, in the back, it was a lower neckline, like the back of our L'Amour dress. So came up to the mid-back with, I believe, princess seams, and then the front connects to the back with 4 spaghetti straps, 2 on each side. And there's about half an inch of space between each set of spaghetti straps, so it has a really striking look in the back. And this dress is unusual because it's very similar, some people believe it's the same dress, that she wore in the film Roman Holiday. So if you have watched that film, and if you haven't, please run, don't walk to go see that film. She wears this beautiful, what I call a coat dress in the final scene of the movie, right? So it's ivory lace. It's the same ivory lace as this Oscars dress. And it has a shawl collar and a full skirt, below elbow length bishop sleeves with a little band at the bottom. And it has a self fabric belt on it. So I love this dress. I know I'm on record saying that if I get married again, I would totally recreate this coat dress for my wedding because it's just so gorgeous. It has a really beautiful, sophisticated vibe to it. I think you could probably recreate it with the Charm Patterns princess coat. It definitely has that silhouette. Here's the thing about the Oscars dress. and about the Roman holiday dress. There's a lot of controversy and conflicting information about who actually designed it. I wrote about this dress recently on Instagram and credited the Oscar dress to Edith Head. And I got a comment from someone saying, actually, it was Givenchy who designed that dress. And I had to laugh because I feel if I had credited that dress to Givenchy, someone would have come in the comments and said, actually, that dress was designed by Edith Head. So there's a lot of conflicting information out there. On Wikipedia, it credits the dress to Givenchy. But I really believe it was Edith Head who designed at least the original dress. Let's backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit about fashion history. If you watch my crowdcast for February of 2025 about the Sabrina bodice, then you'll know a little bit of this history because I shared it there. But Edith Head was the costume designer of record for both Roman Holiday and Sabrina. So those were Audrey Hepburn's two first films. And Edith Head won an Oscar for both of them for Best Costume Design. Where the confusion comes in is that by the time Audrey Hepburn won the Oscar for Roman Holiday, she had already filmed Sabrina. And on the production of Sabrina, which was directed by Billy Wilder and costumes designed by Edith Head, Sabrina is another film that you definitely need to watch or rewatch for Audrey Hepburn and for the costumes. So what happened on the set of Sabrina was that Billy Wilder really felt like this character, Sabrina, needed to have a true, authentic Parisian wardrobe when she comes back from Paris to show her character arc that she has developed into a woman, so to speak. And Edith Head, I don't know why he didn't just say, hey, Edith, could you design some Parisian clothes for us? He felt like they had to be literally from Paris. And he decided that the solution was to send Audrey Hepburn to Paris on her own dime to go to a French designer's house and pick out some garments to bring back and wear on set. And she was going to pay for these. And she did it. So she goes to Paris. She decides she wants to go to Givenchy's atelier. And Givenchy is excited because all he has in his calendar is that Ms. Hepburn, the Hollywood actress, is coming. But he sees Audrey when she arrives and is disappointed because he thought it was going to be Katharine Hepburn. And so he sees her and he says, I really don't have time for this, and points her to a rack of clothing from last season or a couple seasons ago, and basically just tells her she's welcome to look through, but he's not going to help her. And so she does look through, she loves his work, and she picks out a few things, but what is notable for us for this episode is that she picks out the black cocktail dress that she wore in Sabrina towards the end. It is, I'm sure you can call it to mind in your mind's eye. It has that high bateau neckline, and it has two little black bows on the shoulders and a full skirt, and I believe it has a matching belt. So this dress was designed by Givenchy and came to be known as one of her iconic looks. And when I think of Audrey Hepburn, I think of this silhouette, I think of this neckline. And she would later go on to work with Givenchy for the rest of her career, and they became lifelong friends. They considered each other family. Of course, this whole thing really caused some tension back home between Edith Head and Givenchy because Billy Wilder screwed them both, if we're being honest here. Because Givenchy never got credit for designing anything in Sabrina. Edith Head won the Oscar for it. And also, Billy Wilder went over her head and hired someone else's work for the film when she was the designer. So I hate this for both designers, but it does create an interesting story and piece of history. So to get back to this ivory lace dress, we know that the one in Roman Holiday with the bishop sleeves and the shawl collar, the coat dress, that was definitely designed by Edith Head. People say that exact dress was reworked into her Oscar dress. Okay, the one with the very Givenchy neckline. So I think the confusion could be that at this point, Audrey Hepburn had already started working with Givenchy. They had figured out what her most flattering neckline was, and that was really his mark on creating a fashion icon out of Audrey Hepburn, in my opinion. So who knows what happened, but I guess the original dress, the coat dress, was redesigned or reworked into this high neckline, bateau neck with the spaghetti strap back. And it would be the exact same skirt and the same belt. Oh, also worth mentioning that I saw mentioned somewhere that maybe the first dress wasn't actually a coat dress, it was a jacket over a dress. But I really don't think so. Just looking at it, I really don't think so. But that's just me. So the question is, as sewists, I think we can look at that coat dress and easily see how that bodice could have been reworked into the bateau neck dress, right? There's plenty of fabric there. You could have used the back of the coat dress to create a new front with a high neckline and then create the smaller back pieces from the sleeves or the original dress front, whatever. It's definitely possible. I think it's probably a mashup of designs here. We had Edith Head's original design, and then I'm sure the new neckline was influenced, if not directly designed, by Givenchy. So that's what I think. Don't come at me. Or you know what? Do come at me. Tell me what you think. I'm so curious, or what you've heard about this dress. But long story short, she ended up wearing this dress to the Oscars. It's really notable because this is the only time in Oscar history that the same dress was worn in a film that was worn to the Oscars to collect the award for it. That's just not done, right? An actor doesn't wear their costume to the Academy Awards. So really unusual, and I think it's really lauded as one of the best Oscar dresses of all times because it's just so Audrey and it's so unusual in that ivory lace. So when looking to recreate this dress, I had to think of a couple things. First of all, what pattern was I going to use? That one was pretty easy. We had just come out with the Sabrina bodice and the holly back expansion for it in February. And I could easily see how that neckline could be adapted. And instead of using straps or that holly go lightly sort of bib in the back, I would just create spaghetti straps. So I decided on that. It also had an underlay that looks like a bustier. So I decided to use the L'Amour dress for the front underlay to create that bustier effect. And then I used the charm circle skirt for the skirt pattern. That's a free pattern on our blog, by the way, or on our website. So you can download that, and it's interchangeable in our L'Amour series. So the Sabrina is in the Stanwyck series, though. So I did have to do a little zhuzhing to get the two to fit together because the Sabrina bodice, the L'Amour bodice, and the circle skirt aren't all in the same series. So I did have to just check my pieces to make sure that they were going to match and do a little adjusting. So this was really a case of three patterns becoming one. And anytime we do a pattern hack in the Charm Studio, my preferred way to do it is to make a muslin of the original dress. So even if it's something that we've recently made, like the Sabrina dress, I'm going to say, okay, let's make a new muslin of the Sabrina dress, and then I'm going to essentially draw on the muslin whatever neckline or changes I want to the pattern. So I would normally make a muslin in muslin, right? But this time I decided to make it in a cheaper lace fabric that I had on hand. And funny side story, I had a million yards of this lace that I just loathe. So this was around the time of the waterfall dress. I thought it would be really fun to do one of those samples as a bridal caftan look, which I still really like the idea of. And I ordered this ivory metallic lace. So it has a metallic sheen and silver cording on it. And we're going to talk more about corded laces in just a little bit. So I ordered this lace online, and sight unseen, it comes in and I just despise it. The metallic sheen on it has this sort of like greenish gray cast to it that I just hate so much that I cannot stand to look at it. And I'm very dramatic about these things. And I told Andrea that I just wanted to get rid of the fabric. We could donate it, find someone to take it off our hands. And Andrea tends to be the more pragmatic of the two of us. That's her job. And she said, you know what? I know you hate it, but why don't we just put it in a bin and someday it's going to come in handy. And it did come in handy for this Sabrina dress hack. So we ended up making a muslin from this godforsaken lace, and it actually worked out really well. We used the Sabrina front and the holly expansion back. And instead of the holly back straps, I used so we had a roll of satin cord, that sort of like rat tail cord on hand. And I just safety pinned that to the muslin just to get a sense of what it would look like with the spaghetti straps. Though, of course, I wanted to make my own custom spaghetti straps, which we're going to talk about in a bit. So I tried the lace bodice on just with a Merry Widow on underneath. I know what the Lemoore dress looks like, so I didn't need to mock that up. And really, I didn't need to make that many changes except for creating a new neckline in the front. If you look at the Sabrina bodice neckline, it does have a slight scoop to it. It's a wide boat neck with a slight scoop. If you look at the Audrey Hepburn Oscars dress, it has no scoop. It is straight across. It's a severe, just straight across neckline. And so I need to figure out if I wanted to raise the neckline, lower it, and how I was going to straighten it out. So in the end, I really just needed to draw a straight line across, removing the scoop from the neckline. For the Lemoore underlay for the front, I created it from ivory silk taffeta, and I really just created a fully executed Lemoore front bodice. So that means the silk was underlined in muslin. It was also self-lined in the taffeta, the silk taffeta, and had the boning in the front. So I did side seams, those diagonal front bones, and bones over the princess seams. So the front was really just a straightforward Lemoore bodice with the Sabrina bodice over top in the ivory lace. And then for the back bodice, I used the holly back expansion and underlined the lace in the silk taffeta. So before we get into further specifics of construction, I want to talk a little bit about how I chose the lace fabric that I used for the dress, not the terrible greenish gray muslin lace. So looking at laces, you'll find there are several different types. There is Chantilly lace, which is a very delicate, usually floral lace on a net background. It doesn't have any cording. And then there's Alençon lace, which is the type of lace that I used. So the backing is somewhat similar to Chantilly lace. It has a net or mesh background. The background of Alençon lace is somewhat similar to Chantilly lace. It has a floral motif usually and a mesh or net background. But the big difference with Alençon is that it has the cording details. So the outline of those floral motifs will be completely traced in cording, which is a really beautiful textured effect. Alençon lace often has scallops on one or both sides. And really fine French laces are often narrower. They're always narrower than typical fabrics. 44 or 45 inches or 59/60 inches is what we normally see in garment fabrics. But with lace, you're going to see more like 33 inches, somewhere in the 30-inch range, which is really narrow for garments. So you're probably going to have to make some adjustments to your pattern, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. But so those are the differences between Chantilly and Alençon. And there are other types of lace too, like Guipure, but we're not going to get into those today. So as you're looking at French laces like Chantilly and Alençon, you will notice that there is a huge range in prices. So for this dress, I looked at laces that were $10 a yard. I looked at laces that were $38 a yard. And I finally landed on a lace that was $160 a yard, which is, if you can believe it, on the cheaper side for real French quality lace. What are you getting for $160 a yard that you're not getting for $10 a yard? When is it okay to just use that $10 a yard lace? It's always okay, right? It may be the only thing in budget, and that is totally fine. But I want to talk so that you know what are the differences and why one would be so much more expensive than the other. So let's talk about that $10 a yard lace. And I pulled some that we had in our stash. We actually used this exact lace for Susie's dress, her Monroe dress, in this beautiful peach lace with a pink underlining. And it was gorgeous. So nothing wrong with this $10 a yard lace. It is a corded lace. We bought it from Zaloof. I think that's how you say their name. Zaloof Fabrics, which is a really great source for economical, budget-friendly fabrics. And it comes in a lot of different colors. So at the $10 a yard price point, you probably aren't getting scalloped edges, though you may. Actually, that's not true. You may get scalloped edges. They're not going to have a ton of detail to them. You will see on the background of the lace that the mesh holes are going to be quite large, okay? So the finer the holes on the mesh, the higher quality it is. So you're going to see larger holes in that mesh. And then on the cording, the nicest way to put it is if you're looking at the difference between a $10 a yard lace and 160, you'll see that probably some shortcuts were taken in the application of the cording. And also it may not be truly accurate to the motifs underneath. So they may quickly outline a motif and not quite get right on the outline. They're coloring right outside the lines. And it's just done quicker and in a sort of more mass-produced way. Also, those $10 a yard fabrics are going to be wider, which is great. If you're on a budget, right, you don't have to buy as much. So they're going to be probably 60 inches wide, okay? And they will usually have a typical selvage rather than scallops. I also, for this dress, looked at some lace on Etsy that was $38 a yard. And this lace would be shipped directly from China, okay? So it's hard to find this type of lace directly from any manufacturers or any retailers here in the US. But you can find it on Etsy direct from China. And I ordered 5 yards of this lace. Again, like the $10 lace, it's wider and it has a traditional selvage, no scallops. The mesh background is a little finer than the $10 a yard lace. The holes aren't quite as big. Again, there's less attention to the detail with the cording. A lot less attention to the detail, okay? But it is passable and there's nothing wrong with using this type of lace. However, I also wanted to look at some real authentic French lace, like the kind that Edith Head would have used for this dress. So I found some on Fabrics and Fabrics, which I just love that name. And this lace is $160 a yard, which, believe it or not, is pretty cheap for French lace. So other sites, you're probably going to see it be $200 a yard, $250 a yard. And the reason for that is that it's imported directly from France. It's made in specialty lace mills. It's made on traditional lace looms, which are narrower. It often has really beautiful scalloped edges. And if you look at the texture and the attention to detail in the cording, it's just spectacular. I really wanted to believe that I could like the $38 a yard fabric as much as the $160 a yard fabric, but unfortunately, it really is just that much more beautiful. I hate to say it. So you'll also see a really fine mesh background and a more intricate floral pattern. Any of these would be fine for this dress. In the end, I really was excited by the idea of replicating something very similar to the original. So I did bite the bullet. I got a 20% off coupon. Thank you, Fabrics and Fabrics. They have a sort of sign up for their email and you get a coupon sort of thing. So I got a little discount on it, and then I ordered this fabric. You have to get more because it was only 30 something inches wide. And that's because those French looms are narrower. And that also meant I had to make some changes to the pattern. So let's talk a little bit about that to accommodate the width of the lace. So because I did this circle skirt, I could not cut out the full piece on the width of this lace. So instead, I added princess seams to the front and back of the skirt to match the princess seams on the bodice so that I would be able to cut narrower pieces. Okay, so that's one change that I made. I just did it to the lace outer, not to the taffeta underskirt. That has no princess seams. And another thing was this scallop lace, you could put the scallop on the hem of a circle skirt. To do that, you would have to cut out the scallops painstakingly with little embroidery scissors and then apply them on top of the skirt. And that's actually pretty easy to do. You can make it really hard by doing it by hand, but you can also zigzag it on, which is a really very valid and acceptable way to do it. That's how it's done in fine lingerie. It's by zigzagging on top and then trimming away any excess. Okay, so you could do that. In the end, I didn't use any of the scallops, which is a little bit of a travesty because it's so beautiful on this lace. But the original Audrey Hepburn dress does not have any scallops on the hem of the dress. It has a treatment that looks like a horsehair braid hem to me. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because that's what I did. But it's just a straight across traditional hem on a circle skirt. So let's talk a little bit more about the details on constructing the dress. I had to figure out how to do the neckline and front armhole finishing on the lace bodice. I was really nervous about this because on the Audrey Hepburn dress, you can see that it has this sort of delicate, almost like a bound look to it, but not with a fabric like the taffeta. So in the end, I ended up using a coordinating tool, an ivory tool, to do just the tiniest little bias binding or bias facing, really. They got flipped to the inside of the lace. But I only knew that was the way to go because I tested it on scraps several times. So that's always my biggest piece of advice to people when they want to do a hack of one of our patterns. Test it. Test the hack, test the finishing, test all the techniques before you dive in. So that's how I finished the front neckline, but I had to sandwich the spaghetti straps in between the lace and that little narrow binding, which meant I had to first make the spaghetti straps, which I was really nervous about. I have a funny story about spaghetti straps, which is, you guys remember when the first season of The Great British Sewing Bee came out and we were all watching it? I had to get this like special tunnel bear thing so that I could watch a British show. And there was this episode where they were challenged to make spaghetti straps. And I believe it was for a little girl's dress. But these poor sewists on this show had to, on demand, without any warning, make spaghetti straps, or as they call them in the UK apparently, rouleau straps. I believe it just means rolled. Come at me because I don't actually know what the translation is. I did look it up, but I've forgotten. It's really hard. And I remember watching this episode and panicking because I was like, what if I ever have to make spaghetti straps on demand? Who knows? Who knows what could happen in life? And so I just started making these little rouleau straps myself in my sewing room at the time because I was just so panicked by the idea that someone could just demand that you make them and you could mess up and then you would be deemed a horrible or not up to par sewists. So I practiced them at the time, and I remember them being really difficult. You have to have the right tools. You have to have tools that work for you, which what works for one person is very different than what works for another person. It's something that we've discovered in the Charm Studio. And also, one thing I wanted to do with these straps is to fill them with cotton cord because that gives them a fuller look and also strengthens them. So to make my rouleau or spaghetti straps, I practiced several times and I cut 2-inch strips of bias taffeta. And then I figured out the width I would need for my cord, which I think was like a 1/4 inch wide. And then you're going to fold your bias strips. I always recommend sewing with the fold to the right of your presser foot because then you can get a really consistent width on your spaghetti strap rather than trying to align the raw edge. And then you can also just trim away any excess. You don't have to be too precious about having this tiny little strap. Okay, so you sew the strap. I like to start a little wider, so you leave what looks like a funnel at the top of the strap, and that helps you turn it. And then my favorite tool for turning straps, and everyone has their favorite, mine is called the fast turn. It's fast turn, one word with only one T in the middle, if that makes any sense. But it's this little like wire thing that you stick through a tube and then you pull the strap through. And it comes in a bunch of different sizes. So you can do the tiniest little tubes all the way up to bigger, thicker tubes. And the cool thing about this tool, and I'm going to put up a little story on Instagram or a reel on Instagram showing how you do it. The cool thing about it is when you put the little wire through and then you corkscrew the end through the fabric, you can then pick up some cotton cording and pull it through the strap at the same time. So fill the strap with cotton cording at the same time as you are turning the strap right side out. And just to note that, of course, you want to trim down your seam allowances to like 1/8 of an inch before you do any of this. So I tried it several times. Also very important is that when you go to press your straps, you do not want to squash them flat. Do not apply pressure, okay? So you're just hovering overhead with the steam because you don't want to truly press them flat, right? Because then they're just narrow straps. They're not that beautiful fat spaghetti look, which is what I wanted. Very plump little spaghetti. What's the next pasta up from spaghetti? Because mine were quite thick, which I wanted. I want them to be a little bit of a statement. So the other important thing is you want to stretch out the bias a little bit as you're pressing. You can really pull the strap so that the bias stretches out so it doesn't stretch as you wear it. So I created 4 of those straps, and then I sandwiched 2 straps on each side in between the lace and that tiny little delicate tulle bias facing that I made for the neckline. And then I hand stitched the straps in place on the back. Now the almost final thing I want to talk about is the horsehair hem braid. So this is a technique that I have been talking about since I was 6 years old. No, I'm kidding. I wasn't 6 years old. I was in my late 20s when I started my blog, and I was really into horsehair as a technique, and I wrote blog posts about it. I think I did a video on it. And one of my favorite techniques for a full skirt like this is to use horsehair braid, the really wide stuff. So you're looking for 6-inch wide horsehair braid. And this is like a woven polyester material with a string on one side. And you pull the string to shape it, okay? And for horsehair braid, which also, by the way, is sometimes called crinoline, and you see a similar material in hat making or millinery, this is not what you're looking for. Crinoline or hat making horsehair is very soft and squishy, and it doesn't have the cord on it. You're looking for a really stiff material. And I actually ended up ordering a gazillion yards of horsehair braid because I first decided to try ordering a roll from Amazon that got good reviews. And I think there were 20 or so yards on this roll. And I was like, it's okay, but I don't know if it's as good as this stuff I used to get from Steinlauf and Stoller, which is a little notion store in the Garment District in New York City. And so we also ended up ordering a roll of this 6-inch horsehair braid from Steinlauf and Stoller. And they said on the phone, you have to order from Steinlauf and Stoller by phone, by the way, which I can't with that. But they're very old school, so you call them. And they said it was very stiff horsehair braid. So I was expecting to get this magnificently stiff horsehair braid. And then it came in and actually wasn't as stiff as the Amazon stuff. So I ended up going back to the Amazon horsehair. And you basically apply it like a facing. I made 2 separate skirts, the outer lace one with the princess seams, and then the inner taffeta skirt without princess seams. And then I basted them together at the waistline and at the hem, and I finished them as one. So, of course, I let it hang. I evened up the hem after the bias had stretched. And then you apply the horsehair braid like a facing, like a hem facing. You stitch it right on at 1/4 inch and then flip it to the inside. And this takes so much longer than I remember it taking. You have to pull the cord at the top and get it so that it matches the curve of the circle skirt hem. Of course, you're dealing with a full circle, right? It's a circle skirt, and it takes forever. So you have to just really take your time with it, and then you hand stitch it to the taffeta. The upper edge of the horsehair braid gets hand stitched to the taffeta under skirt. Okay, so this is all a really long process. It looks beautiful, though. I will say it, like the way a circle skirt has those sort of folds at the hem, undulates. The horsehair exaggerates that shape, and it really accentuates it in a beautiful way. Now, you can also wear a petticoat under if you want, but you don't have to. I did just to give it a little extra oomph at the photo shoot. But really, the horsehair defines the hem in a beautiful way that a petticoat can't define the hem itself in that same way. A petticoat is going to give you volume, but it's not going to give you that definition of the hem. The last thing I want to talk about is the belt. Okay, so if you look at the Audrey Hepburn belt on that original Oscars dress, it's beautiful and it's covered in the lace. And I knew I was going to have to make my own covered belt, which is something that I hate to do. I just hate it. I hate those little kits. I hate making belts. I hate putting eyelets in things. It's just not my favorite. We used to have a company here in the US that you could mail order custom covered belts from, Pat's Custom Buckles and Buttons. If anyone remembers Pat from the olden days, she was amazing. That doesn't exist anymore. There are places in the city, but I didn't have time to go and get it covered. So I was like, I guess I'll just do it myself. And I tried to cover, the hubris, everyone. I tried to cover the belt buckle in taffeta and lace, this thick corded lace. And it was a disaster. The cording was like fraying off. It just looked terrible. So in the end, I used just the taffeta on the belt buckle using one of those little Maxant kits. And then I was able to create the belt itself from the lace underline in the taffeta. So it wasn't exactly what I wanted in the end, but I think it looked pretty good. Actually, you know what? I think I only used the silk taffeta for the belt. Yeah, okay. So in the end, I only made the belt in the silk taffeta, no lace, which felt like a little bit of a failure, but it did, I have to say, look pretty beautiful. But every time I look at a picture of that dress, I can't help but admire the artistry that went into creating a belt out of that really thick French Alençon corded lace. All right, everyone. So that is it for my first solo podcast. Please let me know in the comments what you want to hear more of. I'm really excited to talk more about sewing techniques and tips and tricks here. All right, so I will see you next time. Goodbye. Well, hello again, and thank you so much for joining me. That's it for this installment of Talk Gertie to Me. If I had to guess, I'd probably say this episode included a lot of fashion and pop culture references, some of which are best enjoyed in a more visual medium. So be sure to check the show notes for images and links.